This is the President McCormack Podcast with your host, Mark McCormack.
Ladies and gentlemen, today on the podcast, we have Eric Steele. Thanks for coming on, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah. Isn't it weird being on a podcast?
It's weird. I've never been on a podcast.
I was going to say, is this your first?
This is my first.
Nice. So I called Eric, I didn't call him. I texted him about an hour and a half ago and said, today's your day, man. Let's get down here. And he's here on time, ready to rock.
Yep. I knew I wouldn't get out of it. So it was a good morning.
Yeah.
It's meant to be.
Yeah.
So
That was awesome. So I like to ask this question for people. How do you know me?
I actually know you through your controller, Eric Lobb, who linked me up with you after I left my last company.
Yeah.
So that's how I met you.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I hired him as a part-time accountant at my last company, just a part-timer.
Yeah.
Because I had a hard time keeping people and I wasn't allowed to hire a permanent position. So I hired a part-timer who had a poor resume as an accountant, but who seemed really bright and wanted to learn, because I figured I'd be able to keep him around rather than most accountants with a good resume. They'll eventually find something permanent and move on. Well, Eric was a phenomenal hire. It's funny how things worked out. And then years later, he says, hey, come work for us over here with Mark. And that's how I got to working with you.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because if you look at it, to give myself some credit, which is funny, it's kind of the way we do business at ADP Lemco, right? Like he kind of worked himself out of a job for us and kind of worked himself into a part-time position at ADP. But then he was like, well, I'm going to go work at, was it PMI? Was that the name of the company?
PMA.
PMA. Going to work at PMA part-time, and I'm kind of going to do both. And I was just like, cool. Yeah, because my attitude is just like, well, whatever's best for you, it's good for me and it's good for you. And then he ended up making a really good relationship with you. And then, we got really busy at ADP. And then when it was time for you to transition, we're just like, yeah, come work for us. And it's been amazing ever since.
It worked out beautifully.
Yeah. It's kind of a lesson in just treating people good, which is one of my staples in life. I really try and treat, especially employees, really good, because you never know what will happen in life later on. Because I could have said to Eric, like, hey, we don't really need you. We're going to hire some other person full-time or whatever. And it would have been fine. He would have left and been happy, and so would have thought I was a nice guy and liked his time here and would have gone. And he's a talented guy, so he would have went off and found something else. But just kind of being like, no, just be flexible with you. Like let's work out something that's good between both of us. And we got you as a hire, and which is amazing because he also went and learned a lot of skills underneath you.
Yeah, he asked me a lot of questions about your accounting.
Yeah.
Which helped him get your stuff set up. And it was funny when I came over, the way he had stuff set up was so similar to how we had set it up before, which is why it was starting to work well.
Yeah, you should take that as a compliment.
Yeah, because one of the things with Eric Lobb is he really pays attention and he wants to learn and he listens.
Yeah.
And then he goes and he does it. He's a really bright guy. You're really lucky to have him.
Yeah. Oh, honestly, I honestly feel like I'm lucky to have all the employees. Even the ones that drive me nuts.
That's true. We had our Christmas party yesterday.
Yeah.
And looking around, I just love the people we got. We have a great crew.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference work for people that you really like.
Yeah. And we have a good mix of fun and hard work. Like people come to work and do their jobs. We don't have a lot of fluff. We're really efficient. I mean, you're one of the major guys that just comes in and just gets work done,
Yeah, and we're pretty busy.
Yeah, we're busy. And I was looking around last night because, I'm the leader, I'm the boss, and it's like we rented out a restaurant and we're kind of having fun. We have all these gifts and we do like the same thing every year, but people love it. And, you get to meet these wives. And we brought a couple guys down from my other company, Professional Floor Systems. And it was interesting to see them mix in, because you actually get to deal with them because the funny thing that people don't really realize is you're not technically an employee of ADP Lemco. You're a contracted guy to me, right? You're actually, I guess you're companyless. And so you work on all the stuff that I want you to work on, which is awesome, and it's such a major benefit for me because I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like there's just this loyalty and a friendship between you and me, and it's just unbiased to whatever. It's almost like you're like, hey, Mark, what do you need? Like what's the best thing for me to work on? and you do a fantastic job at it.
It's kind of like my mindset too. My mindset's that, like when I come to work, and I'm not saying this because you're my boss, but everybody should do this, right?
Yeah.
We report to somebody. There's a reason for that. You report to the customers, right? Ultimately, you report to them. You got to make sure they're taken care of so we earn our value. I report to you and Shane too with Highlands, right?
Yeah.
So when I come in, I want to do a good job for Mark every day.
Yeah.
That's why I think I want to do a good job for Mark. Helps me stay focused and do a good job, earn my money.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think most people just intuitively do that, but some people are more conscious on that. I'm doing a good job today, because then you go home and you feel like you did a good job and you were saying as productive, efficient as you could. You get a lot out of it. It benefits everybody.
Yeah. Well, and you can see it in work product too. I mean, our financials are amazing, right?
Yeah, that's kind of like, for me, the financials are like the end product. Like, so I like them, not only the numbers to be right, but I like to present them in a way that is easy for you to look at and scan through and say, oh, that's what that is. Make little notes on things, kind of highlight things that kind of stand out that you might want to know.
Yeah, and it keeps me managing, right? It keeps me, you giving me the data, the dashboard, whatever you want to call it, that I need. We look at it and I take that and I make decisions off it all the time. It's kind of like, it's funny too, because it's kind of like an unspoken thing between, the financial people and like the management of the companies, right? As you guys present a report generally, right? We take that report, go do things off of it. And it's like, I don't know, it's kind of mechanic, like not like with like project management, like they're in my office every freaking day saying, well, they're mostly in Skylar's office now, right?
Yeah.
Asking things, coming up with things, needed permission for this, they don't really need permission. They can, we give them autonomy to go do what they need, but they like to have constant like affirmations, where with, the financial department, especially you, it's just like, no, you just pound it out. The way that it needs to be done, the way I like it done. And then we just move.
Yeah. And it's a lot of that, which you don't really realize right through your career. Like, I've been doing this 25 years.
Yeah.
You don't realize how much you've learned. A lot of us, we don't realize that we've learned a thing or two over the years, right? To where for me, putting together financials, it's just automatic. It seems easy to me. And I love doing it. I love taking all the financial stuff and putting it all together in a way that makes sense. Yeah. I love that. I just love doing it. And you can probably tell I love doing that.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't need direction because I've been doing it. There may be certain things that you prefer how I do stuff. But typically I typically know the numbers better than anybody in the company, because I am in the details of the numbers too. Although I don't spend as much time looking at the big picture unless you and I are discussing something or you want to examine something.
Yeah.
But I love that. I like putting it together, and I kind of intuitively know what to do. And that's what you get when you hire someone who's got a lot of experience. And some people, they don't realize that there's a big difference between, or there's a lot of value added from the experience that you don't even realize. Like yesterday, I had an experience with Easton. We had to pay one of our vendors, the snowplow people up in Idaho.
Yeah, yeah.
And they gave us wrong ACH information. This is just a small little example, right? But Easton called them, came back, and they said, oh, just drop off the S004, whatever it was at the end of the account number. And I go, will you double check that? And he kind of responded with an email, right? An email is a poor way to communicate. You don't get emotion and all that, right? Yeah. He says, are you not trusting me? It's kind of like what I felt. So I called him because I wanted him to think that I was second guessing him. Yeah. I said, no, it's just something, I just ain't not comfortable with that number. Just drop off that. I'm not sure on that. The number looks different.
Right.
He calls them up and talks to the person. They say, well, let me have you talk to the actual accountant person. Talks to the accountant person. Oh, that's not the number at all.
Oh, really?
Wasn't the number at all. It
wasn't.
It wasn't just dropping that off. The number was a whole different number, and they got that number so that when you go to set it up, we're not wasting your time and we get it right. He goes, "How'd you know, Eric?" I go, "I don't really know, but it's just like that experience. It's like you just kind of pick up on little things that you don't realize." And I said, "Easton, don't be afraid to double ask or ask questions multiple different ways sometimes, because I do that sometimes. Even people, why are you asking me? You already asked me that, but." In the process of asking them to make sure I truly understand and get all the angles, I very often identify things.
Yeah.
But that's part because I'm a money guy, so I'm really kind of anal retentive and OCD a little bit, which you got to be a good money guy.
For sure.
You got to really understand and get into the details. And then if you get all the details right, then the end product's going to be right with financials.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because the more financials, I think every person in a company should really get some level of understanding of a P&L, right? Because that's really how you can find your value inside of a business. if you've been in a business for 4 years and you're like, well, I do a good job and I bring sales in, so you're a sales guy, right? You know, I want to make more money. And it's like, you know, you go to your boss, you ask for a raise, and the boss is just kind of like, there's just two different languages being spoken, right? Because I can look at an employee and say, you bring in X amount of money, right? So we have a new sales guy in our company. I brought him into my office the other day and I go, hey, we pay you this much money. You would like to have commission on top of that. You have to bring in X amount of revenue, and I broke it all down. Cost of goods sold, tax that we pay, blah, 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 blah. All the overhead, computers, internet, you know, just having you in my room, you know, all this kind of stuff. And this gives us a gross profit number and then a net profit number. And then when you really break this all down, you have to bring this much revenue into the company every single month to justify your existence in here. Right. And I could tell he was just like, I have never thought about it this way. And I actually said to him, I go, if you ever want to negotiate a raise, this is the number that you have to look at, because that's the value that you bring. And I said, I want to make 3 times what I pay you. So if I pay you $10,000 a month, I want the company to be making $30,000 net. And he was like, oh, okay. You know, and that is a financial or accountant's way to look at a business, because it's unemotional. Doesn't matter how you make me feel. The numbers are the numbers.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a lot of positions where you can't do that well.
Yeah.
A sales guy is a prime position where you can, and they can actually see what they're adding. The project manager, same thing. We put together, you know, the job profit report on every single job, and I can have a report for that I update every month. And the project managers, especially Tom, he'll come quite regularly and say, hey, can I see do you have it updated?
Yeah.
And he'll look at it and he'll want to see what his average margin is, and he'll scan through his jobs and look, oh yeah, I know what happened here. I know what happened there. It'd be good for all the project managers to pay attention to that, because even if, you know, a job goes to hell, in the back of their mind, if they know at the end of the day they're going to be looking at the job profit report, they're still going to try and save it as much as they can. It's just, if you know you're watching it, you naturally are paying more attention to doing what adds value to the business. Yeah. Just like your personal budget. If you actually go at the end of the month, like I do, I had the Cadillac personal budget. I have it all in QuickBooks. Last 10 years, I can run my own financials, including amortization of my house mortgage. But I love doing the numbers, right?
I say that surprises me.
I'm sure it doesn't surprise you.
Not at all.
Right. So I know exactly what I spend on everything. So I don't really, you know, I have extra, so I'm blessed that way. But just the fact that I'm tracking it, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm always a little bit aware of it, so that I'm a little more careful in how I spend, so that I come in and stay on track with what I want to do for savings and retirement and all the other stuff. Because I'm watching it. If you don't really watch it, if you never looked at your numbers, I mean, how are you going to manage it? You don't really know what's going on. If the project managers don't look and see at the end of the day how their projects turned out, if they have no care whatsoever, they're not going to be subconsciously thinking about it when they negotiate with a general contractor how to handle a particular issue that came up. So I love that Tom does that. Travis does it occasionally. We should have him do it probably a little bit more.
Yeah. You know, it's a great indicator, right? I mean, when you're at your job, if you want to know if you're doing well, how much money you make in the company.
Yeah. How are you doing on your job?
Yeah. It just is what it is. Yeah. Yeah. It's a fun way. And when I took over as president in 2007, I wouldn't say we had an awesome accounting system, right? It was some proprietary software that we had back in the day called Visual, right? It was made by Infor, and it was messy, right? It was old. I mean, I think we implemented the software in the 90s.
I saw remnants of it. It was kind of a mess.
Have you seen remnants of it? Yeah. Man, I thought I deleted all that bull crap out. But I remember, like, you know, being a young executive, I kind of got the keys of the vehicle thrown at me a little bit, you know, and then like, yeah, go take it for a spin kind of thing. And I remember thinking, I'm like, I can't make decisions based on how people feel. Like, it doesn't matter how they feel, because I'd grown up in the business, right? So I knew employees that were good and I knew employees that were not as good. And I knew the reasons why they were the difference between them, but it was hard to quantify, right? Until I did quantify them. Then it was like, oh no, these are the metrics that you really need to kind of pay attention to grow the business, you know, especially cash flow, right? Accounts receivable is all fine and good but it sucks until it's cash in the bank.
Yeah.
Right. And being in the construction industry, right? I mean, we carry high accounts receivable, where if you're a retail business, you know, your accounts receivable are basically nothing because you collect money as you sell. And so I learned really quickly that I needed to dive in and go, okay, if I'm going to steer the company in a certain direction, I've got to do it based on net profit. You know, so I've always been a net profit guy, like what's falling down every single month. And when our business back in 2007, when I became president of it, we actually had months we knew we were going to lose, and then months that were going to be really big for us. We don't do that anymore. We win every month now. But, but you know, we would go December, January, February. Generally, we're losing months. You know, so we'd have like negative $300,000 in a month, right?
You knew you had to plan.
Yeah.
And build up some cash.
Yeah. So you're always building up cash, right? Because if you're constantly, you know this, if you're constantly financing your business, you're just costing yourself money because there's a cost of money. You know. Now we keep way too much cash in the business, but you know, if I had my investor friends look at it and be like, what are you doing? But it's like,
but you have no stress.
Yeah. I like to sleep at night.
You have no stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're able to pay everybody on time, which if we did have a slowdown, you then can stretch the terms and they don't say anything because they know you'll make up for it.
Well, it's kind of like in 2020, right? I mean, there was a couple vendors of ours that I stretched a tad.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's because general contractors are paying super slow, like super slow. And I was also getting real nervous, right? Because it was like, oh my gosh, is this thing where general contractors start going bankrupt because they're not allowed to work?
Right.
You know?
Right.
Or is the government going to freeze their spending? Because a lot of our money comes from government contracts, you know? You know, we got a bond that was passed in a state and they're building schools. And if that state just goes, well, hey, we're worried about COVID, you know, we're going to shut everything down. Like there was a bazillion variables that could have came out of the coronavirus fake pandemic.
Yeah. And I saw you slow down on the payables.
Yeah.
Which I don't remember hearing grief from our major vendors.
Not one.
Yeah. And you went, you know, you maxed out the terms, which were in terms.
Yeah.
But case in point, you always pay on time or early.
Yeah.
So you had established a great relationship. So when you decided to raise a little bit of extra cash, just in case, they didn't even quibble.
Yeah. And we had a consultant years and years ago, probably in the early 2010s, you know, 2011, 2012. And the way I would pay, I'd do the same bills back then. I just pay. You know, we get a bill today. I'd look at Friday, pay them all, right? And he's like, this is crazy. You know, you've got to hold your cash and you got to put it in sweep accounts and you'll make an extra whatever.
Yeah, small little bit.
Yeah, and I'm looking at him like, you don't get it. Like I didn't have the balls to say that back then, right? Because I'm like, no. You pay people as fast, vendors. You pay your vendors as fast as you possibly can, because there becomes a time through all business cycles where you need them to extend you terms, and that can either be in a time of turbulence or it can be in a time of growth. Right? Especially in our business, right? If we slam $5 or $6 million more onto the bookings, right? And we don't have the cash to support, because, you know, we don't get paid for what's our average payment coming to us?
Probably over a year.
50 days. No. I mean, like once we actually
typically
bill.
Probably 45 days.
Yeah, 45, 50 days.
Bill them.
And some of the Jack A contractors, right? Whatever we want to call them, right? They'll stretch you for 90 days all the time. You know?
Yeah, and it's some of the real big boys too. And they, you know, they got the cash, but they just do it.
Yeah, they just stretch it because they can. And so being a smaller subcontractor, you have to understand the cash position that you have. And so, part of weathering that storm is to be able to go to some of our larger vendors and say, hey, we grew a ton. You can see that benefits you because that's more sales in your pocket. But I'm going to need 90 days, or I'm going to need, you know, 120 days. Because to fund this growth, but don't worry, I'll be paying them, you know. And then, you know, if you got 15 years of paying them early, they go, yeah, no problem. Because they get it. They want more business. They know that your business is going through growth pains. No big deal, right? Especially if they're bigger and they can handle it. But if you're that dude that's always paying late, which we know who they are, you know, I become a Nazi almost with them, right? Because I'm like, no, we're not going to freaking do any favors for them. That dude's a pain in the butt. No, blah, blah, blah. He never pays on time. And I've been watching that balance my whole career. And I'm always like, I'm going to fall on the side of, yeah, I'll pay you in 5 days. You know, as long as the accounting department's put the bill in this week, it's getting paid. And I don't care if, I mean, one of our guys, you know, one of our vendors, we don't pay for 60 days. You know, I pay them all the time within 10.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just.
My dad used to always say, because he was a small business guy, he goes, you can tell the character of someone by how they pay their bills.
Oh, yeah. You've told me that before. Yeah.
And that reflects really well on you. Yeah. And I've worked for other people that pay as late as they can possibly pay. Even when they have money in the bank, they'll have $1 million sitting in the bank. And I was like,
yeah.
You know, I don't get that. There's an integrity issue too. You know, you agreed to do something within a certain amount of terms. You know, if you can do it, then do it.
Yeah.
That's why sometimes with Highlands, you know, I go, Mark, you got to pay these people, even if you got to put more money in.
Yeah.
You know, and how you balance that sometimes is hard on a new company. Like Highlands is, you know, Professional Floor Systems is a newer company, and we're doing well, but it sucks a lot of cash initially as you build up the equipment and the receivables.
Yeah.
And then
it's why I kind of hate startups. I've had startups beat out of me the last couple years, I think, because it's fine to fund them, but the problem with startups, and I've looked at a couple distilleries to buy and a couple different things this year, and I look at these companies and they make poor decisions with their capital. That's the hardest thing to fund. I'm not speaking about Highland specifically, but there's certain things where if you take your capital and not allocate it right, basically buy too much inventory, right? I mean, most of the companies I'm involved in, it's an inventory issue more than it's like
which it was with
R&D
Professional Floor Systems. We had too many floors, more than we needed that we could sell.
Yeah. And so then you know, I look at all these piles of wood and I'm just looking at it like, oh, there's $900,000 in cash sitting there. You know, it's like,
exactly.
or
that we
whatever.
can't touch, that we can't pay other vendors with.
Yeah.
Till we liquidate it.
And then I got to stick, I got to keep on floating the company with more money. And that's fine. Is what it is. But now that I look at, if I'm going to invest in a company in the future, I'm like, I want you at $10 million in revenue because there's just enough business that's been done that I don't have to capital infuse you all the time. Normally my investment will be the first capital and only capital investment, and then we'll grow with your sales plan more than, hey, we're just shooting. Buy it all.
There's definitely more risk when you're in that. Like Professional Floor Systems, the first couple of years, there's more risk because, even though everything's working together, you think it's going to work well, and it has. You don't know for sure.
Yeah.
And you're putting more money in, not knowing for sure.
Yeah.
So you get a higher multiple on your return as an investor that way though too. But it's
sometimes,
riskier, on average over time.
Probably, but I look at it too with kind of going back to the guys that stretch their vendors out a long way, right? Really, they're making maybe a point and a half more money in a year, where I'm more like, I'd rather take my energy instead of trying to figure out how to put my money in sweep accounts and all this stupid garbage. I'd rather grow the business. So if I'm the business owner and I'm taking my time and paying my vendors quickly and then going to my vendors and being like, hey, what else do you guys sell? Like, for example, we were just talking about turf. Right? I started looking into turf probably 3 years ago, and we've done a couple turf jobs like I was telling you about, but we just bid our first official full on, massive job, a $1.3 million job. And if we land this and we set the market, we kind of figure out exactly where we need to be. I mean, I could be landing 25 jobs a year. And so the revenue that comes from that and the energy that I've put into growing another product inside of our business will massively outweigh me trying to get an extra 1.5 on my cash all year long.
I would completely agree.
Yeah.
You're losing a little bit of return maybe on that extra cash, right?
Yeah.
But you don't have to worry about it. There's no stress. There's no worry there whatsoever. And you can put that focus into another, another line of business.
And this new company we're dealing with is Shaw, right? And if people understand Shaw is a massive mercantile company in the world. I mean, they do all the carpet. I mean, most carpet's done by them. I think almost every line of turf is built by them in Dalton, Georgia. There's 4 major companies there, and I think they either own 3 of them, or it's kind of interesting how it works, but they are enormous. And so when I'm trying to build a relationship with them, they want to see our financials, right? And then if they're, we start doing a ton of business with them and they're going to start extending me terms, they're going to want to talk to the other vendors that we do business with. And I don't even need to prep the other vendors. In fact, I have never actually prepped a vendor for a new vendor to call them, ever.
Yeah, we have a lot of vendors who would give us a great review.
They would just call and be like, yeah, ADP is great. They're competent. They pay their bills on time, sometimes early, all sorts of stuff like that. And even going and talking when we've gone through with Morco, right? We've done some negotiations in the past where I'm like, I want a better price. And they're like, well, if you want a better price, you got to pay quicker. It's like, I already pay you quicker. And then they look at it and they go, oh yeah, you actually only average 16 days to pay us. And I'm like, yeah, I'm your best vendor. And they're like, yeah, you're right. And then they give me, 2 or 3 points better which, on $4 or $5 million a year of product we buy from them, that's a significant amount of money.
It probably helps you more than if you squeezed them and used that little extra to invest in a little bit of a, some sort of return on your extra cash.
Yeah. Yeah. It's anyone listening to this podcast, this is like amazing advice. Really.
I would love it if more businesses would do that, because it's less stress for the accounting department too. Because when you're running tight, then we have to cash forecast and spend all this energy into cash forecasting and balancing things and fielding vendor calls and trying to explain and tell them when we don't ultimately know, when are we going to get paid, right? Yeah. And that sucks a lot of energy and time out as well. I mean, it really does. It takes quite a bit of time. And
it actually breaks the energy of the company a little bit of your culture, right? Because if you're working for a company and they're stretching people, then they like come up with, like in construction, there's always stupid excuses, right? Oh, supply chain. Oh, this, oh, that, oh, we're still kind of reeling from coronavirus. And it's like, are we? And so then you become the company that's always being questioned too by the vendors. It's like, I like ADP, but they got 45-day terms. They pay 49 days. I asked them about it. They're blaming supply chain issues. Well, we're their supply chain. We're the vendor. You know what I mean? It just makes you sound stupid. And so, like when we talk to people and they start coming up with all sorts of stupid excuses, you see me do this a million times. I'm like, like there's no way that's real, and you're like, well, that's what they said to me. And you want to assume they're honest, right? But like when you really understand the market, you're like, no, they just tell everybody that and they're just squeezing you. And then you kind of get like a bad taste in your mouth for that company. And so I just always wanted to avoid that. I just always want people to think, ADP Lemco, man, it's interesting. Whenever I deal with their accounting department, their pay applications are correct, or they pay us on time, or they're smart, where like we couldn't make a delivery, so they sent their guys up to pick it up, and it was all above board and papered, and they sent in an invoice that wasn't made on Excel. I think all that stuff's super important.
It comes back. It comes back and it benefits you.
Yeah.
It does come around.
Yeah. And the cool thing too, not that like ADP's been perfect for a long time. That's not even close to what I'm trying to portray here. I mean, when you came on board and when Eric was really learning Eric was actually a purchaser for us when he first started. And then he got into project management, and Eric was just a guy that would kind of work himself out of a job because he becomes so efficient at something and be like, oh crap. And he'd be like, I got nothing to do. And be like, okay, let's give him something new. And then when we moved softwares from Visual to QuickBooks, he's like, I'm just going to learn accounting and then set the chart of accounts up correctly, or the first time, and then finally got it right. And then there was a lot of professionalism that brought the company. And then by bringing you on, it was just like the next step up, like everything got more professional and more anal. And it's funny because, we have some employees that are just like, why do they care about this, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, come here, let me put my arm around you. There are two forces at work here. There's you to get the job done, and then it's the reporting it correctly and making sure that everything's been accounted for. So yeah, you don't care about this one little minutia thing, but it's important on the backside of the financials to make sure that we have accounted for it, so we know exactly how much money we're making and how the company is going to progress, so we can make proper decisions, right? And they're always like, okay, because it makes sense that way.
Their perspective doesn't include that in their day-to-day job, so they sometimes wonder.
Yeah, like, why are we coding it this way? Or why are we doing this? Or, why does he bust me up every time it's at 10%? It's just like, because I'm angry about it. That's why. I'm glad you came to the source. Like, why are you bidding stuff at 10%? You know what I mean? Or what happened? Why'd this blow up? And it's like, because we want the company to move everybody at the same time. Like everyone's on the same page and we're moving down the road. To me, that's the best way to keep a company moving and make it, sellable one day. And so,
and having good numbers make a huge difference when it comes to sell your company.
Yeah. In fact, not to name names on here, but we're working, we're sending some financials over to essentially a private equity arm of a business that might invest in one of the companies we're talking about. And when I was negotiating the initial part of this with them live in their office, I could tell they've gone through some of the things where they've talked to businesses and their accounting's garbage.
Yeah, and they don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, and so they're trying to buy these companies because the companies are great, but their accounting's so garbage, it's hard to value it. And I just remember thinking, I'm like, I have the most confidence ever that my financials will be exactly what they need to be. And so, which comes along with, quite frankly, I mean, if someone, say you have a really good business and your accounting's garbage, and they're going to be like, well, we can't really trust what these guys are saying, so let's do a 5 times multiple, right? And they agree on a 5 times multiple. But then you take a company like ours, where they have perfect financials. I know exactly where stuff is. I know how it's growing, where the profitability is at. I know exactly what EBITDA is, right? I'm like, no, our company is worth like 7 or 8 times earnings. And they're going to have to agree to it because the financials prove it.
Yeah.
2 or 3 points on a multiple.
Yeah. It pays for itself.
That's a lot of money.
And it becomes, when you're small, it's viewed as a expense that people don't want to spend for the really small businesses.
Yeah. So
their accounting really suffers. And then they're a little less likely to make it bigger when that's the case.
Yeah.
I remember I was with a company once where we got basically screwed by the main supplier. So the owner went and sued the main supplier, who's a massive company, which everybody knows. And he was a pimple on their butt, right?
Yeah.
He sued him and said, hey, you guys changed the deal. And this was the deal. And they had their big lawyers that were getting paid $1,000 an hour out of DC, fly into where I was. And they deposed me twice because they tried to rip our numbers apart, right? Because it was a startup. It was a startup, and we went from having, no businesses to having like 50 different locations around multiple states. And they tried to rip them apart. And the attorneys don't know the numbers like the numbers people do.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there all day in 2 different depositions for this. And they couldn't rip apart the numbers because the numbers were solid. And at the end of the day, this is unheard of, largely because he had solid numbers that proved exactly what happened and how much we lost and what we put in and everything tied in. He won. Unheard of. He won, and he got paid a significant chunk of money, which actually turned what ended up dying because of the main supplier into a profitable return on him after he got paid out.
Oh, good.
Because he had solid numbers. And they couldn't dispute that. So.
Well, and we joke around all the time. You and I, we talk. You might be, well, we're small enough. I talk to most of the employees every day, but you and I converse a lot. Mm-hmm. We talk a lot, especially because I got to take a right out the door every day where your office is. And I like talking to you, so we talk. But we joke about a person we know, and his financials are just garbage, and he ended up losing his house over it because he basically reported to the IRS more money than he needed to. And if anyone's really dealt with the IRS, you tell them what you owe. It's not like they come to you and say, hey, here's your tax bill for the year. You put all your financials together, you fill the form out when you do your taxes, you tell them what you owe and you pay it. And then if they ever have a problem with that, they come and audit you, right? It's pretty much how paying taxes works. And when I was going through this guy's financials, I remember, I joke about it, I almost like do a little act about it now, but it's like, this is really sad. Like because you don't know your numbers and you wouldn't pay for this and you've never really learned this, you lost your house because you told the IRS you owe way more money than you really do, and you ended up losing your house in a tax sale. And it's just crazy. If you go back and look at it.
It happens. You got to have your numbers right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
You think you got a handle on it. He's a prime example. He thought he had a handle on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes these people still think that they have a handle on it. Yeah. And you can work with them. Like we work with a couple of our, I guess you say, subcontractors where we're helping them.
Yeah.
I'm being careful in how I say it. But they don't realize how our admin help in helping run the project from an admin side and getting all the numbers together and all the billings right and everything so it flows good, how that helps them be more successful. But we've seen it.
Yeah.
We've seen it happen, and you've helped that one, which we won't mention, actually become really successful and repay you all that money he owed because we were just doing the admin overlooks at the financial side and the management, much in the management side as well.
Yeah, because exactly. And in our world in construction, because you have to we don't send invoices. We actually send pay applications. And so what happens is people book jobs that could be 2 years out. So your quote unquote sales look good, But then you start collecting the money. And if you don't have everything right with the contractor, you hit the next cycle. So they essentially pay once a month. And so if you don't have your stuff in correct, you just cost yourself 30 days. And if you do that 4 months in a row, you're going half a year before you're getting paid on something. And what that does is create a cash crunch in these businesses. And so then when money starts coming in, you look at your account receivable and you can say, hey, I'm making a lot of money. And you could be, but if you're not collecting that money, then you start robbing Peter to pay Paul, which is a term we say all the time.
And that happens all the time with small businesses.
Yeah.
They don't realize they have these liabilities and these things they have to provide because they're having these deposits, or they got money coming in and they spend it. See, one of the things about you is and this is a generality too, and you hear it over the years, is people who are willing to put off temporary pleasure, so to speak, for long-term gain, tend to do better in everything in life. In your prime example, you have extra money in the company. You don't just pull it all out. It took you a long time of living on less than what your net profit was to accumulate that money so you don't have to stress about it.
Yeah.
And now you have the extra money to pursue additional, lines of business or invest in other businesses, buy people out, whatever, because of that. Yeah. Because you're living on less than you make.
Yeah.
Rather than pulling it all out and immediately spending it on lifestyle.
Well, isn't it funny too? Because you look at people actually understand that on a personal level, I think, because they look at themselves and like, hey, I make X amount of dollars and I've got to pay my house payment and some bills and some food and gas and whatever, right? And they can kind of budget that in. And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm not going to spend more than I make. But then they get inside the business world and they're like, oh, look how much money I made. And it's like, you haven't collected the cash yet. And then they start kind of living wild. Because there's a term that I've heard, you've probably heard me bash on this, but people will say write off, right? Like these guys will be like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a business owner, then I can write this off and I can write this off.
Oh man.
And I just want to smash my face in a wall. I'm like,
I need to buy that because I'm making too much money. So I need to spend the money on this.
Right.
So that I can save some taxes.
Yeah. I just bought a $90,000 truck because I need a write off. And it's like, you have to make the money first to write it off. Like it's such a misunderstood term. Would you agree?
Yes, people don't get it.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't get it. There's people that get it, but there's a lot of people that don't get it.
Yeah.
I was just talking to someone this week, matter of fact, they're talking about that same thing. This person was working 60 hours a week. They're an hourly employee. Mm-hmm. And their company's having a hard time, like a lot of companies, finding people, right? So they were offering them to work a 7th day. And this person's trying to save money. They go, I don't want to work an extra 10 hours a week. It'll all go to taxes, right? So they're thinking 60 to 70 hours, all go to taxes. And they're probably making 80 to 90,000 a year counting their overtime, right? And I go, no. They weren't going to do it because, it's just all going to taxes anyway. They don't know. They just don't realize, and a lot of people don't realize this, that their marginal rate, I think, is 22% federal, 5% Utah. And they're still in the, 8% roughly for Social Security, the payroll taxes. But they keep everything else. And for going from 50 to 60 hours of overtime, they're keeping and bringing home just as much proportionately as they are from 60 to 70, but they didn't get it. And their withholdings might go up to where they don't get it immediately, but it'll all come out at the end of the year. Yeah. But this person's a really smart person, but they just don't understand that aspect. And that happens all the time. People just don't understand.
Yeah. See, with me, I would advise that person if they can handle it mentally, right? Mm-hmm. It's like up your exemptions and have less money taken out of your taxes.
Yeah, they could file another W-4 with their employer.
Right, And then, see, my thing, people always ask, like they used to ask me, they don't ask me anymore, right? Because I don't get tax returns generally. Or I don't get money back. I overpay is the only time I ever get money back, right? And they're like, well, how much do you kind of, have taken out of your check? And I'm like, I'd have nothing taken out of my check because I'd rather have my own money and then at the end of the year pay what I owe than give the government a free loan. But a lot of people can't handle that.
Yeah, and you pay a certain percentage to the IRS, which is fairly low interest rate.
Yeah.
For under withholding or not paying quarterlies enough.
Yeah.
But that's pretty minor. You just use that basically to finance the business.
Yeah.
We could probably do a little better on that. We'd probably pay a little bit.
We could. Yeah. But also, though, kind of what we're going before, though, it's like I want to control my cash.
Yeah, that gives you total control. Yeah.
Yeah, I've just seen there's just too many businesses and personal, people in their personal life, they wreck themselves because they don't have cash to one of the biggest things in our country, right, is you hear like people, the average like family only has $900 saved up in their bank account.
I know, it's sad.
Which kind of blows my mind. I believe it, but I'm also like, there's a lot of things that cost $900. I mean, crap, how much did it cost me to put 4 wheels on a truck, 4 tires on a truck? It's like $1,800 or something. Yeah. It's like, dude, and then what do you do? And then you got to start financing it, right? And then people start financing with credit cards, which are the highest interest rate things you can possibly get. And then it's just like, yeah, you're pushing yourself in this like insane world where I take that same logic and apply it to the business where it's like, nah, I want to keep enormous amounts of cash because if something happens, I can just take care of it and the business doesn't skip a beat.
Yeah, you can sleep well at night.
Yeah. I also think it's an energy thing, right? I mean, like in our office, there's an energy that everyone brings, but especially me, as being kind of the leader, right? If I come in with, confidence and we pay our bills and we take care of things and you guys are all getting paid, everyone knows they're not going to skip a payroll at ADP. Like they just know that there's just that kind of that energy inside the business. And I'm not saying it's, some overwhelming energy, but it's like, it's an understanding that we have there.
Yeah, you definitely set the tone. You set the tone as the owner. And other people, like managers, like if an owner isn't around much, but he has like a VP or someone, the owner still largely sets the tone.
Yeah.
Because people know when they talk. So the way you are with the employees and the way you spend money sets a tone.
Yeah.
And that can be good or bad.
Yeah.
In your case, it's positive. And I've told you that a number of times. I love working for you.
Yeah.
I can see why people are drawn to you because you do things that exhibit high integrity.
Yeah.
And people pick up on it. Pay your bills on time. You care about your employees. Even if there's a problem with somebody, you try and save it before you'd ever let somebody go.
Yeah.
You probably go a little bit overboard that way. But if you're going to go a little overboard, it'd probably better go overboard that way. To go a little bit extra to try and make something work.
Yeah, we agree. You are very complimentary of me, which is nice, honestly.
And I've worked for a lot of people, though, Mark, too.
Yeah, well, that's why it's nice, because it's, in my position, I don't have a boss that comes in and tells me you're doing a good job, right? It's really what it boils down to. I'm not a person that actually needs that all the time, which is good. Because I've seen some owners, right, who they need praise. And so what they end up doing is like doing weird things to get their employees to praise them. And then it's like, what? I don't get why you do that, But for me, it's like, it's nice to hear from my employees like on a real irregular basis. Like, hey, I like working here. It's really fun. I really appreciate it. Like our company party last night was interesting. To be honest, yesterday, I just wasn't in the mood to do it, you know?
It's one of those days.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some tax stuff I got to get done, and I got some other crap I got to get done, and there's just kind of all this stuff where I'm like, I just need to be like in my office for like 8 hours uninterrupted, not talking to anybody, not can I talk to you for a quick second kind of thing, to get some stuff done before the end of the year, which I'll fit in, we'll make it happen. And so, but then, but I left at noon to go buy all the gifts that we give away, and which is actually a lot of fun. It becomes kind of fulfilling, right? Like Skylar and I go to Costco and we just start buying random stuff, like, oh, this looks fun. This looks fun. We used to always give away a big TV, and then, no one wanted a TV this year. So we didn't do that, and I, even though I was a little grumpy in the morning about doing it, by the time I like bought the presents and kind of was like, went home to grab my wife, I was like, oh, this is fun. I freaking remember how much fun this is, and then we get there and all this, the employees come with their spouses or a significant other. And then, you start seeing people and it's like, everyone's happy. We're at this restaurant, we're eating food, then, by the time I jumped on the mic, I was just like, oh, here we go. Everybody, what's up? What's up? And one cool thing from last night that's good for me. And I'm talking so we had a couple guys come from Professional Floor Systems, and I'm talking to them and I go, hey guys, sorry, I haven't really introduced you to a bunch of people because everyone here has been here for so long that we just know each other. I mean, we know spouses in there. We just know, we just know everybody. And as I'm saying that to them, I'm realizing it's like, dude, that's because we've created this cool culture. And I might be the leader of it, but I'm not the only curator of it. Like it's a self-contained, everybody participates culture that people like to come to. They like to come to work. And we tease each other, we have like stupid little nicknames for people.
Because even though they're, we have someone in the office who's politically way different than the rest, right?
Right.
but we all get along. And I think we legitimately care and like each other.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm
oh,
pretty
no,
political.
absolutely. Yeah. We have a culture where, I mean, it's a small business, right? So we work 4/10s. Most of us work 4/10s, you know, but I don't even care when people work. That's another funny thing, right? I mean, you know, you're a 5-day, sometimes 6 days. I don't know. So most of the time I go there, you're sitting there,
I just
right?
have to get it done.
yeah. Just get it done, bill it, you know, let's make things happen. You know, if someone came in my office and was like, hey, I've got to deal with my kid, something happened, I can't come to work till 1. Are you okay if I work from 1 till 8? As long as the position's fine with that, right? Like if you couldn't be like, you know, if you can still call contractors for a little while and do your work until 8 o'clock at night, I'd be like, great, knock yourself out. Like I wouldn't care at all. I don't care if that place was open 24/7, as long as it worked for other people. I'm even at the point where we don't really have little kids anymore with our workforce, but back in the day, I wish we would have had a daycare, you know, where people could just like bring their kids if there was a problem. And our office is weird now, right? Because it's like every now and again, we'll have some kids in the office.
Yeah, every now and then we'll have some in.
You know, I mean, I bring mine sometimes, Skylar. I mean, most people, and I like that it's a place where people can do that. And I told every employee, because, you know, I'm in and out of the office quite a bit. And I'm like, and my office is big and it's got a TV. So I'm always like, hey, if you got to bring your kids and I'm not here, put them in my office. Let them go crazy. You know, try not to let them touch my computer because I want my stuff on there when I get back. But you know what I mean? It's like, let your kids go wild in there. And I like it. To me, it's a nice tone to come to work. And if someone's brought their kid in that day, even if the kid's like crawling over the kitchen or the seats, like, I don't care. I'm like, oh, cool. Little Billy's here or whatever, you know, like it's kind of nice, right? It's nice to have.
I like it.
I'm personal touch.
That you'll get a little distraction here and there, but it's a positive one.
Yeah.
It makes me smile, but I like kids. I think everybody else is cool with it too. So it works in our office.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah, absolutely does. I like it when spouses come in too, you know, like, because you get to see them. It's like, hey, how's it going? You know, like every now and again, you know, like Eric Lobb might have, you know, his wife in there, and, you know, it's nice to see her. It's nice to be like, hey, what's going on? How are your kids doing? And I don't know, because I said it last night, right? Where I say, like, hey, it's your family away from family. I have a pet peeve where people call everybody their family. Oh, we're family here. And it's like, you kind of diluting the word family, you know? So I like, in our business, I like it when we get the family touch or the family influence from actual people's real families coming in. And that's nice to me. You know, does that make sense? Kind of a feeling on that?
I would call it family, but
yeah,
because it is. I mean, I'm around them more than anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you'd hope, I mean, not everybody goes to work every day and likes working with the people they work for.
Yeah.
And like their bosses or even the people under them.
Yeah.
We have that. And you've helped engender that. And everybody else has helped. And your key people have helped.
Yeah.
So that's a blessing. If you can create that culture in a company and the CEO, the owner, sets the tone for that, you got something that's hard to put a monetary value on it, but it definitely helps the whole business.
And it helps me depend on people too. Actually, I have some weird relationships that I manage at work, quite frankly, because I have like really good friends that work there, right? Like Skylar is a really good friend of mine. He's probably one of my best friends, right? But I'm also his boss, but I treat him as a contemporary too a lot. And so, in fact, I always run a risk of being in conflict with him, I think, because it's a multi-layered, complex relationship that he's accountable to me, but then I also depend on him a lot. It's just it's an interesting dynamic if you watch it, and it works well. It works really, really well. And I think that's because both of us, and probably especially me, I pat myself on the back. If there ever were a conflict, I would quickly resolve it with him. And I think I would do that same with everybody in the office, but especially him. And then I also have my brother that works there, you know, which is also a very multi-layered, complex dynamic, because I think people, when you have a brother or a family member work for you, people always assume they get like preferential treatment, you know, where quite frankly in the McCormack family, you kind of get shit on more than you actually get preferential treatment, you know. I've actually fired my brother. I fired him for He was gone for a little while. I want to say like 6
Kevin?
weeks.
You fired Kevin once? Years ago.
Yeah, he was a project manager, and I lost my mind.
Oh, wow.
And I still think I'm justified by doing it. And he actually might agree with that. And it kind of hurt our relationship, of course, you know. But we figured it out. And I discounted some things about Kevin that was bad for me to do. He's insanely loyal, right? And loves me. And I love him. You know, he's one of the people that I can depend on Kevin no matter what. He can depend on me no matter what. There's just like but he was not doing his job well. And I was at a point in my career I was like, I don't care what your last name is or how you're related to me or how friendly we are. You are going to do your job, you know? And I still kind of feel that way. Like if you're going to work in a place, there's a bare minimum, right? And that's doing your job, right? And so if you're failing at that, you're going to run the risk of not having that job anymore. And I think one of the problems with Kevin in that position is he wasn't being trained very well, which reflects on me and, you know, some of the past people that were executives. And we just got caught in that crosswind where I made the best financial decision for the business and not the best decision for him, which if you look at it now, I mean, you know, Kevin's a fantastic employee, does really good stuff. He installs for us. He works in the office. I mean, he has an amazing relationship with customers. When you look back, it's always a good thing, right? But, you know, we've got someone that's worked for us for 2 or 3 years and they're like, oh, well, Kevin gets to do whatever he wants. And it's like, everyone here gets to do whatever they want. You know, you want to throw a last name preferential treatment on him, but dude, this kid's been fired before. We've had, you know, massive conflict and he's
I didn't
been
even
refined.
know he'd been fired before.
Yeah. You know,
And he just, you know, he's a prime example. I only see a little piece of what he does.
yeah.
But he's great on the phone with customers. I know that. I hear him talk. He's great with customers. And he just does his stuff. So I can see why, you know, whatever it was that wasn't working before, I mean, he just does his stuff. He doesn't need to be told what to do. He just does.
Well, you know, he was mid-20s.
Yeah, a lot.
You know, unmarried. You know, he was, you know, not to go into the details of it, but like, you know, and honestly, if I could have gone back, where I screwed up is not jumping on the mentor train when I first started getting annoyed with his work product, instead of kind of letting him hang himself a little bit. And then, not that I didn't mentor him at all. I mean, we had performance reviews and different things like that where I was kind of harping on him. But kind of what I was saying, I kind of learned the way my dad treated me. My dad, he beat me down is not the right way to say it, but it was like, go figure it out. Like I became a project manager. I'm like, hey, Dad, I don't understand how this works. Go figure it out. Like, oh, okay. Like I joke with people. People are like, wasn't it amazing to have your dad mentor you? And I'm like, yeah, you haven't been Scottish mentored before. You know, like, yeah, he's like, here's a task, go finish it. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, well, let me walk you through every step, son. Come in here. I mean, we sell whiteboards. Let me write on one. You know what I mean? It wasn't a lot of that at all. I mean, sometimes probably, but like, it was a lot of just go figure it out, which if you look at how I train people, kind of mentor people, I'm gonna like, go figure it out and then come back to me. We'll go over what you did, you know? And I'm a lot better than he was at it, you know, because I want to skip to the good part with people where I'm like, no, let me break this down a tad. But at some level it is, you know, go and do it, you know? But yeah, I mean, kind of going back to, you know, complex relationships inside the office, you know, and I mean now, and even his wife Victoria works for us sometimes, not you know, not as much as she used to, but kind of bringing her on, you know, to handle. Is she doing accounting stuff? Is that what she does? I'm not even sure.
Yeah, she's working on some of the collections.
Right.
That we need to look at every now and then.
Yeah, and so you know, we bring her in, and it's just like, oh, I made this even more complex because now I could potentially get his wife to be upset with me, which is gonna, you know, causes turmoil for him, then it causes turmoil for us, and. But, you know, I've always just thought, well, we'll just deal with problems as they come. And
you know, it takes two for it to work, especially when you have a younger brother working for you.
Yeah.
And it takes mutual respect.
Yeah.
I've never seen any disrespect aimed at you ever from your brother, Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
And I obviously never from you towards Kevin.
Yeah.
So it works. It's not always like that. Sometimes you'll have dynamics where there's not the respect and they're thinking, well, why is he doing, you know, I should be doing blah, blah, blah. You know, why dad sell the business to him? Why don't you know what I'm saying? I've never picked up any vibes on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, that's another thing too. So, you know, I bought the business from my parents and Kevin was excluded from that sale, you know, And that was a bit of contention inside of our family for a minute. It really, really was. One of the things with Kevin, kind of the dynamic in my family that's interesting is my dad's best friend is Kevin. You know, they like to do outdoors things together. They like to go, you know, and they're side by sides, and it's a beautiful, awesome relationship that they have. My relationship is not that with my dad. You know, mine's more, I think my dad with me is more trusting of me. Not that he doesn't trust Kevin, but like I'm more of a, I don't know, it's actually hard to define. I think he can depend on me, and he knows I'm reliable, and I've kind of fallen into that for him. That's why he kind of made me president of the company. He knew that he could rely on me to do things. Kevin's more fun. I'm not a fun thing for my dad.
I don't know Kevin like you do.
Yeah.
But when I look at how you run the company, your dad picked the right guy.
Yeah.
Kevin I don't know Kevin enough to really fully say that, you know, or have much credibility in that statement.
Yeah.
But I see how you run it. Everybody's got their different gifts, you know?
Yeah.
And he certainly didn't make a wrong decision.
Yeah, no, I don't think he did
You've
either.
done a great job.
And I don't think Kevin would disagree either. I think Kevin, Kevin has a great life. You know, he's got a beautiful wife, great family, you know, beautiful little daughter. And I think he's happy. And I think that's really the most important thing at the end of the day.
And he does well, and he runs his own, runs his own business schedule. He runs his.
And one of my major things with ADP is I didn't want a partner, especially when I bought it, because I was like, I built this damn thing. I've put my personality into it. I'm not taking another partner on, you know? And not to go into the whole negotiations of buying the company. That took like 5 years, by the way. It was forever. And my maturity level or understanding of the business, I would not have bought in it if I was going to have a partner. And so I kind of gave, you know, not to give my parents a ton of credit, right, for picking the right one. I gave them a freaking hardcore ultimatum on it. They had to choose. And so, and you know, it worked out my benefit. I think it's a relationship that everyone benefits in a tad, you know, or everyone benefited in the sale of the company. But I need to be able to control it. I mean, you know, working for me, the way that it runs, it's how I think and feel, and it's kind of how I breathe. So
Works well. And I really like your dad. Your dad's really personal. I can see where you got that. I can see
he's
people
great.
like doing business with him.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Well, and my dad and I worked great together. A lot of it was too, is I kind of joke about him not mentoring me all that much, but he also let me do it the way that I wanted to do it. Which, you know, you get a succession plan coming in from father to son. And I wouldn't say that we're vastly different in how we manage things. Almost because, I mean, gosh, I worked for him for years and I'm trying to remember everything, but like we do have a different management strategy. We have a way different view, sales strategy wise, way different. So my dad was real heavy on controlling the manufacturing. You know, he wanted to, you know, we used to be in a 60,000 square foot manufacturing plant, right? I'm like, why are we wasting our time and energy making stuff? Let's go get it private labeled and do some deals and make it work, and then jump into the sales and management side. You know, I call it the making money side, right? You know, because manufacturing's hard. I mean, you're dealing with all sorts of different things, and the company at the time when we made the choice to not manufacture all of our stuff, you know, and do private label agreements, we just weren't. If you looked at the numbers, we were not big enough to get the economies of scale to make manufacturing worth it. And he would disagree with that, probably even to today. Or maybe not now that he can see that the sales vision and the growth of the company. But back then it was a major discussion between him and I. We never really had contention with business decisions, but it was different. I mean,
that was a major decision on your part.
Huge.
To end the manufacturing.
Yeah.
Cut down a fraction of the employees.
Yeah.
Outsource that.
Sold the business, sold the equipment.
Yeah.
I mean, we went all in.
And it's ended up working out even better.
Yeah. Because I look at it too, it's like we only have so much time, right? In life in general. And I look at business life and it's shorter than your normal life. And I'm like, well, I think we need to go make as much money as possible and be able to grow the overall revenue and net profit as fast as we can. And the best way for me to do that was just get that anchor off our neck. You know, we used to carry, I mean, crap, we were doing $5 to $6.5 million of business back then. And I think we had like 1.4 in inventory. I mean, and then you have receivables on top of that, which back then probably would have been about 600 grand, 700 grand. It's like, that is a lot of cash wrapped up where it's like, no, let's sell all of our inventory. Let's bring it all in house. Let's invest that money into new product lines and people and salespeople and all that kind of, which is exactly what we did. That's the decision that I made. I actually, it'd be kind of funny if some of our private label partners listen to this, but I actually always had plans on rebooting up manufacturing. Because I was just like, whatever, we'll grow the business to, $20, $30 million in sales. That will easily support us being a manufacturer again. Then I can take $4 or $5 million and just resurrect the manufacturing side. But we're not going to do that because now that I look at it, it's like, nah, I'd rather just have more product lines. More product lines, bigger touch.
So you guys, this is obviously before me, but you built the actual basketball frames and everything. You actually built it. And you built the whiteboards, right?
Yeah, we had laminators. We had, I think ADP at one point had like 145 employees, I think at their peak.
Yeah.
ADP Lemco. Yeah. Which is, I mean, what are we running on now? Less than 20.
Yeah. It's
and that's without the installers on both of those calculations.
Right.
And so a lot of that technology helped a lot.
Yeah, that was a huge decision. And yet the bottom line is better than it was before.
Yeah.
And it's much less complicated.
Yeah.
So that was really that was a huge positive decision.
Yeah. I'm glad I got lucky.
Yeah. I don't know. That took guts, man, to get rid of all that.
Well, it totally did. And our private label is with a competitor, right?
Yeah.
And so you really look at that. My dad was stressing about that pretty good. He's like, well, you give up control. And my whole thing was, it's so funny. I'm saying these things now with so much confidence, right? But like, even back then it was like, we're going to eat up so much of their production that they could never cut us off, right? Because there's one thing where you go to your competitor, they make your stuff and they go, hey, guess what? We're not making it anymore. And they just stop, right? That would hurt. That would be bad. Because there's only so many competitors you can go to have to do the same thing. And if they won't do the same deal with you, then you're just like, I have no one to make this stuff and I have a whole bunch of contracts and no one can make it. Then I would have been forced to resurrect contracting or manufacturing, which then would have meant I would have had to take on investors at that time. I mean, it was a major decision, but my whole thing was like, nah, I'm going to have to trust these guys, whether it's earned or not. I'm going to have to trust them and I'm going to have to eat up enough manufacturing of theirs that they'll never leave us. Right. And that's how I made the decision.
Do you know what percent of their business we are? Like with our major basketball manufacturer?
I would guess they don't like to tell us. I would guess we're 20 to 30%.
So enough they don't want to lose it. Yeah.
It would hurt bad. Yeah. The good thing is they're owned by a private equity group, right? So if I rip that business out from them now, their multiple on that gets destroyed. Yeah. No, we're embedded real well. And I like them. It's not just that I've got some cold-hearted financial decision up in that business. I like those guys. I trust those guys. They try and do good by us in most of the states we do business in. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of the decision-making thought process on it. And I made that, I think I was 35 when I made that decision.
5 years ago?
6 years ago.
6 years ago?
Maybe 7.
So it's pretty 34. Recent then.
Yeah.
Whereas ADP had always been a manufacturer as well. And now we're a manufacturer only because we have them manufacture it for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We basically outsourced our manufacturing. So, which isn't all that uncommon. There's a lot of businesses that do that. And even, we didn't actually make our own glass backboards. We didn't make our own rims. And even inside our industry, a lot of that stuff used to be in China. And so even the quote unquote manufacturers didn't make everything A to Z either, which is, that's common. There's a lot of businesses that don't make every single part. Even car manufacturers are the perfect example, right? They don't actually make the brake pads. They don't make the rotors, they buy all that stuff and assemble. But
yeah, that was a huge decision. When I think about it, it just goes to show us something people think about. Focus on what you do well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of fun, right?
Yeah. So manufacturing was always a sore point. Always I'm only going off from what I've heard. It was always kind of a stress.
Well, I mean, it's just one of those things, right? You got to have the right people, and you got to have, and there's a lot of parts to it, right? You had to have painters that were good. You had to have welders that were good. Mm-hmm. You had to have a manager that was good. You know, one of the guys that managed the shop for a long time was my uncle, and he was not good at it. He was an alcoholic. And so he missed more, I think he missed about 4 months of the year just being quote unquote sick.
Oh, wow.
And we added the hours up. I mean, he might've came in most days, but, and he's passed away. And so I don't want to sound like I'm, harping on the dead or anything like that. But the bottom line was he just wasn't a good manager. And that was a relationship that my dad, I don't know how he would actually respond to that if he thought he handled it well or if he didn't handle it well. And I don't really know if he handled it well or not. It was hard. It was his brother. And actually his brother was his best friend. Yeah, absolutely best friend.
That had been hard for your dad.
It was really hard. It was really, really hard.
Because at the end of the day, he had a business to run and payroll to meet.
Mm-hmm. It was holding the company back massively holding it back. And so, because he lost the culture of the company a tad, because my uncle was a family member that could do whatever he wanted and never get in trouble for it. And then he was kind of a grumpy dude sometimes and fun sometimes. And then when my dad would put pressure on him, he'd go out in the shop and take it out on them. And then, people didn't really know how to handle it. He was a big bodybuilder kind of guy. And
Mark, we're grateful. I'm so grateful that we don't have that sort of drama.
Yeah.
But that's a reality in a lot of companies. It's just a reality. It may not be between family members. It may just be between coworkers or different managers or management and the line.
Yeah.
And you've been able to create a culture that's positive, and people, from what I see, people like working there. They're grateful.
They tell me they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think they do. I mean, why would you stay at a place if you hated it,
Some people do because they're afraid of change or, they don't know what's going to happen somewhere else.
And one thing that was always important to me was I always wanted our company I wanted people to not just work there because it was okay. I wanted them to actually enjoy coming to work, and it didn't mean they needed to be overwhelmed, joyous every day. I'm playing ping pong for 5 hours a day in my awesome tech job. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was more like, no, because you have to have responsibility at your office too, like wherever you work. If you're on one guy in a team of 10 that's on one project and you're not really contributing to it, I think those are the people that hate their job. Even if they're well compensated, they don't, they're not valued and they're not contributing.
They don't feel like people inherently want to feel like they're adding value.
Exactly.
Where they're at.
Yeah.
Or it's going to affect their psyche.
Yeah. And the one good thing with us running as lean as we do with the employees is like, we need you.
Yeah. And people see that they're needed in their spot.
Yeah.
Even our good guy, George, right?
Yeah.
He had a spot. Sure, he had his little idiosyncrasies.
Yeah.
But he had carved out a spot where he added value.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was important to him to do that, which is good, and the employees that he benefited, they benefited from him. Me? Yeah. No. No, it's good. I mean, I benefited from George too, but he just there's a bazillion inside jokes about him. I'd ask him to do something, he wouldn't do it. I'm like, I'm going to freaking kill this dude. Even though I like you,
But even he had his spot though.
He had a spot.
Where he was good at certain things.
Yeah.
He had his other drama. That was probably one of from my, 3 years with you, that was one of the guys that had created some drama.
Yeah.
But he created his value in a spot. And it's too bad what happened with him. But
it was probably pretty funny watching him drive me crazy, right? I know a couple of other guys think it's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, keeping his old beater car in the parking lot.
Yeah, I know. I got the freaking landlord busting me up all the time. And I'm just like, could you please move this thing somewhere? And then he'd not do it. And then,
Oh, man. If you have a boss like that, be grateful for it. Don't do what George did.
Yeah.
Bless your heart, George.
Yeah.
Don't come haunt us.
No, it's funny. I mean, when you look at ADP, what do you think? What's your favorite part about working at ADP?
Oh, I like the people I work with. I do like that. I mean, everybody that's there. But probably the autonomy and flexibility.
Yeah.
The people, they kind of make your quality of life as a business owner is determined by your customers largely, right? For a lot of businesses, some more or less than others.
Yeah.
And your quality of life kind of in your business life is determined by the relationships at your work and how that works, right? So I enjoy working with the people there. So that makes a big difference. Plus, I have complete autonomy, as you know. You know, I got to get my stuff done. But I can come and do it when I need, you know, when I can do it, and it's flexible.
Yeah.
So when you couple those two things, I love it. Sure, I could probably go somewhere else. Maybe, you know, one thing, you're not really big. You don't like having to spend a ton of money on benefits, right?
Yeah.
But I'm a contractor.
Yeah.
So, but look at what I got. I have a great group of people. I work for people that I really respect. And that's a big thing for the money guy, because you see people's character, because you see how they spend their money, right? And I have autonomy. And you trust your people to do their job. You have people that you've hired that you can trust, which is huge. If you can get in that spot, you're in a good spot that way.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win. I love that. I love working for you, Mark. I really do.
Oh, thank you.
People are lucky to be able to work for you. And one of the things that you don't have the benefit of is you didn't work for a bunch of other companies during your career, right? You worked for your dad.
Yeah, true.
But you didn't pick up bad habits either. But you don't see just the magic that you've created either. Where people who've worked for a bunch of other people, they come and work for you. Wow. You know, you created that. You created that without even realizing what the other side is sometimes, what other people deal with, you know, creating a culture like that. So that's good.
You.
And it's working well, and the business is thriving.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, we're doing good. Other thing too that I like is I feel like people are proud that they work at ADP. You know, I think that when they talk to the people, you know, they're like, "Oh, you work at ADP Lemco?" And people are like, "Yeah, I love working with that company." You know, like that's an important thing to me. That happens probably pretty rare, you know, because you're not just like bumping into people that work at like Hogan or like Westland or, you know, or Tiger Construction from Washington, right? But I've met people throughout my career. Like the guys at TD West, right? When I first was meeting them, they've worked with our company for years, and they work with Skylar, right? And they finally met me because they want to do bigger things with us. And I'm like, oh, great. You know, it's nice to meet you. And as soon as they get me alone, they're just like, hey, you know Skylar? I'm like, yeah, I know Skylar. And they're like, we love that dude. Like, we just love working with him. I called him up the other day and I was like, hey, I need you to do this thing. And then I kind of forgot about it. And I called him back up and said, hey man, when can you guys get over there? And Skylar was like, we did it yesterday. You know, and you know, Skylar's dry, right? Just we did it yesterday. Great. Yeah. I'm glad that's done that. Yeah. Awesome. You know, and they're just so complimentary. I mean, I get a lot of compliments about the employees that work at ADP from people. And a lot of them are from Skylar, but they also, I mean, it's the guys that talk to people a lot, you know, even Craig, you know, I mean, you know, people, he's on the sales side, the negotiation and the smoozing and, you know, all the stuff that he's good at. And even when I talk to certain, you know, when I go and do field measures, which I haven't done in a while, but I used to do a lot of them, they'd be like, yeah, I'm working with Tom or I'm working with Travis and, you know, they're great. And then, you know, I'm like, are we taking care of you guys? And they're like, yeah, your boy, you know, Craig, you know, he was funny, you know, he this and that, you know, he loves Washington. And like, I can almost hear their personalities being complimented when I talk to people on site. Now I've been chewed out by guys on site too, you know, Stoller was a pain in the butt or whatever. But for every complaint, honestly, I bet I've had 8 to 15, you know, compliments of just the employees, and it's awesome.
That's pretty unusual, Mark. Especially
in
our industry. I bet you that's unusual.
Yeah, in construction, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Where they feel because it's really easy just to get your job done and no one notices you in construction, right? Because it's very rare you go above and beyond, because you can't really go above and beyond product wise, because they're hiring us of six backstops and a curtain in a gym. We go and put 6 backstops and a curtain in a gym and it's kind of done. Right. And so it's kind of like, yeah, you did your job. Like, what praise do you want, kind of thing. That's kind of the attitude of the industry. Right. So when they are complimenting you, it is literally on the small things. It's yeah, man, he really stayed on me. I had like a real busy 6 months there because, you know, the concrete guy was behind and he just constantly stayed, hey, do you need this? You know, we need this color. And, you know, I got it to him. You guys were here on time. And you're just one of the contractors I never have to deal with. You know, you're always done. You're always on time. You're always getting things. And like, you're just, you know, that is like a major compliment that we get. Is it's just like, yeah, well, you never caused me problems. Like you hear that from a different industry and you'd be like, well, of course, why would you cause him problems? It's like, no, you're not hearing what he's saying. He's like, you're one of the best subcontractors because I don't have to babysit you. Right? Like that's what we do really, really well. We're turnkey. When it's time to work and execute, we execute.
Yeah. And you want to be that type of employee too.
Yeah.
Where you don't cause problems. You just get your job done.
Yeah. And when you look at the body of work, you're like, oh, this is excellent. Mm-hmm. I just like working with these guys. And which is why our business grows, because when they got when we're in a price competitive bid, they look at it and go, oh, these guys are only, $2,000 different, but man, ADP is so much better to work with and they're always on time.
We know ADP will get it done.
Yeah.
They'll just get it done. They'll figure it out, get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. And they'll problem solve with us and come up with solutions. And I mean, it's an interesting business because there's all sorts of problems. They run HVAC right where our stuff goes, and we're just like, yeah, we'll go around that stuff. No big deal. It might cost you a little bit more money, but well, that's fine. We'll just eat that, where some trades are like, nope, you drew this in the architectural plans. This is exactly where it's going. I don't care. We just don't have that attitude. We just make it happen. What do you guys need? Here's the best solution for it. Even if it costs them more money, they had a pleasant experience with us, which is great.
Yeah. In the construction trades, from what I see, that's really the case. There's always problems. You're trying to coordinate multiple different, subcontractors, and they all are coming from different angles. There's always problems. But just in business in general, you create your value by solving the problems.
Yeah.
That's really what you do. And that comes back to integrity too. How do you approach solving those problems? How do our project managers approach it? Are they acting in good faith, right?
Yeah.
Are they just trying to squeeze all the money out in bad faith? See, we don't want to do that. We don't want our general contractors to do that. You don't do that to them. Yeah. They got to make a little bit. We got to make a little bit. Do we make it work? Solve the issues that come up and make it work. And you set that tone for us, and that happens. And they see that because you see the compliments. We do have general contractors. They don't work like that.
Yeah.
And of course, what does our main sales guy do when he's dealing with them? He's got to up the bid. So they end up paying for it in the long run.
Yep.
Whereas if they were just more reasonable and set a tone of being a little more reasonable with their subs rather than throwing their weight around, they'd probably do better business.
Yeah.
They'd come back to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, number one, thank you for working for me.
Thank you for having me. It's a win-win.
No, it's awesome. I really appreciate you. And it's one thing I'm trying to be better at, actually, as a manager. I do have goals to be better. Is make sure that every employee hears from me at a regular clip that I appreciate them working for me. Mm-hmm. And so when you guys, you're first on the list because you're going to come here today.
Thank you.
Like even last night, the Christmas party, right? I was kind of like, yeah, I appreciate y'all coming, but it's in a group setting, right? So it doesn't really punch as hard as it should. Plus it's a Christmas party. What else am I supposed to say? Right. Mm-hmm. And so, but no, I really, really appreciate you working for me. I appreciate you coming on the podcast at the drop of a hat. You're a wealth of knowledge. You're an amazing benefit to the company. I like working with you. I like your personality. It's an amazing win-win for me.
Thank you, Mark. Ditto. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Now to end the podcast today, I'm going to have you give me your best 2 minutes of advice. You can say whatever you want. It could be 10 seconds. It could be 5 minutes, whatever you want to say.
2 minutes of advice. Wow. You caught me off guard with that. 2 minutes of advice. Well, from an employee, I would say go to work every day and try and do a good job for your boss. I mean, that's why you're there. You're there to solve problems. Every company has its problems. Every company has some drama. We have a lot less at ADP. Go to work and try and do a good job. If you don't, or if you're not treated well, or if you feel you're being treated poorly as an employee, always don't change doing a good job. Always do a good job. And I tell new hires this. I tell people who are having troubles at their company. I tell friends, and I tell my boys this. You keep doing a good job, even if you're being poorly treated and horribly underpaid. Because if you start justifying doing poorly, you start creating a pattern of doing poorly because, well, so-and-so, and you can justify it. And it creates a pattern in your life which is not going to help you. You keep doing a good job regardless and go start looking for another job on the side if you really want to leave. But you do and be the type of person you want to be. Don't let someone else, a bad boss, a supervisor, whatever, affect how you are going to be as an employee or as a business owner. You do your best every day. And if something's not working, you keep doing your best to the last day you're in that company. And you give them good notice and you leave on positive terms because that's how you want to be, not justifying, oh, well, they don't deserve it. So what? You do how you want to be and move on if you're working somewhere where you don't like it.
Yeah. So. Oh, that's great advice.
And I would say as business owners, because you have a lot of high-level people on here, and I've worked for a bunch, pay your bills on time when you got the money. Only stretch people if you need to. Don't try and shift your financing onto the backs of your vendors, especially when you don't really need to, when you're not in a position. And sometimes you need to, it's a balance. But have integrity with those people you're dealing with and your vendors, because it comes back to you. And if you treat them well, and if you treat people in general well in life, it will come back to you. And you can sleep better at night on top of it.
Yeah.
So that's probably it, Mark.
Awesome, man. Well, Eric, thank you for coming on the podcast today. Thank you for working for me.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the President McCormack Podcast, brought to you by McCormack Foundation, Saxton Fund, ADP Lemco, and Professional Floor Systems. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and keep up with Mark on Instagram @President McCormack.